hate me for saying this, but sometimes it's illogical for people on government assistance to get a job. Just because somebody is able-bodied does not mean that they're able to work. Because you have to look at it from a stance of survival. If I'm getting Section 8, if I'm getting food stamps, if I'm getting all my needs met on government assistance, what do I stand to lose if I go get a job and they start cutting my aid? Now I'm homeless. Now I can't afford to pay my bills. Now my kids don't have food, because once you start working, they will start cutting your benefits. And the issue with the system is they don't teach people how to survive without the benefits. The system is designed to keep people on these benefits and depending on the government. What we need is a revamp of the system where we focus on job readiness, where we focus on teaching people budgeting. We focus on teaching people how to spend their money, how to live, how to thrive. Right now, all we're doing is creating a generational poverty cycle. And I know a lot of y'all are going to get mad and going to get triggered and not listen to what I'm saying. But if you were in a position where you're a single mother with children, right now, you don't have to worry about where your kids are going to live. You don't have to worry about where your kids are going to eat. Would you risk that for the sake of saying you're employed?
I don't disagree with her to a certain extent. So she's right and she's wrong. The thing that she doesn't understand, okay, let me start off with the things that she's right about. The thing that she's right about is the fact that the system is incentivized for people to stay on government assistance. And so what they do is they reward in bad behavior. But this comes from the part that she don't realize is that this comes from a long line of neglect from the Democratic Party, which is one of the reasons why we had to get off the Democratic plantation. And then I'm gonna continue to break down some of the points that she said. But the main thing that I think that she's really hitting at that needs to be addressed is the fact that they've incentivized them and tied them to the federal government. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of men that have been having this conversation for a long time. Single mothers felt comfortable leaving their households or having children out of wedlock or walking away from the man that they decided to marry because they knew that they had that safety net up under them, which also removed them from holding themselves accountable and responsible for actually doing the right thing. And or as they got more freedom, the freedom to vote, the freedom to be able to work, the freedom to be able to do what they want to do with their bodies, all of that, they never took accountability for what they were. So what the Democrat system has basically did was made y'all reliant on them, which incentivized y'all to continue to vote for them. So they use people's tax dollars in order to tie you to the federal government for the rest of your life because you knew basically they became your daddy, they became your savior, and you knew that if you didn't vote for them, that the possibility of somebody like Trump getting in and holding you accountable for your decisions would then limit your options. You would have to go to work. You would have to go to work. And that's the thing is that never, no other community could you look at this and see how exacerbated this problem is, how exaggerated the problem is, how large this problem is, and how it's absolutely destroying a community. Because if you actually go back and you research our historical records and you look at the wealth gap between black people and white people, it was much smaller when black people weren't dependent on the government because they built wealth through family. The biggest way for you to pull yourself out of poverty is to depend on each other, right? And so if you then had a strong family, because being in a relationship was more of a business than it was just love. Not saying that love didn't need to be there, but being in a relationship meant that you were exchanging strengths for weaknesses. If you wanted to have strong children, which then at some point pulled themselves out of their circumstances and eventually got educated, then you had a traditional family structure that worked. The woman usually was the nurturer of the kids. The man was usually the one that brought in the resources. The kids were the ones that benefited. So having a strong two-parent household that was married was beneficial. The minute that they then removed the man out of the household and then they substituted it by a whole nother industry, we call it family court now, and men advocated for updates to the family court laws as a result of voting for Kamala Harris, but they completely ignored that and said that we'll give you legalized weed on a federal level. When you actually start to pay attention to the fact that they destroy families by incentivizing women to look at men as baby daddies instead of looking at them as husbands, then that's when they then tied themselves to the Democrat Party, despite the fact that the Democrat Party has never really done anything for you to help you pull yourself out of it. So the Democrat Party now feeds you enough, or until Trump got in, obviously, because we've seen the changes. The Democrat Party basically fed you enough in order for you to survive, but not enough for you to thrive. And that is where the cycle of poverty started to begin, because you then knew that you would be able to stay on Section 8, and then that would be your gift to your children because they would then be on Section 8, and this person would be on Section 8. And so you were incentivized to have more children in order to stay in the system. And then you, even though you was messing with this dude, you always said that you didn't know where your baby daddy was. And so you also never wanted to get married because you didn't want your benefits to go away because you then have to be a responsible adult. So basically what she's saying is that it's the system's fault that they don't have the motivation to be a responsible adult to be able to take care of themselves, and they'd rather marry themselves to the government instead of marrying the person that they had sex with and holding themselves accountable for who it is that they're vetting to be with. And the children are the ones that's going to suffer the most because they basically raising monsters. They raising people that are ultimately, and here's the second wave of it. Now you have a lot of women that was raised in single parent households. You got a lot of men that are sassy. Yep, I believe that a lot of the sassiness comes directly from not having two parents in the household. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a father and still be sassy, but you're less likely to if you actually have a masculine role and figure that allows for you to feel in controlled environments that, and then, that continues to pour into whatever it is that's going to be beneficial for you. But here's the other side of it, though. The second wave is, all right, so to now, let's say you have a kid and he's smarter than you and you still on Section 8. He said, you know what, I want to make it out of the projects. I don't want to be in subsidized housing. I want to be a viable adult. Or you got these women or whatever, and when they say, you know what, I'm going to go and get educated. I'm going to be the first people to go to college. So then they go to college, and now you're seeing the direct results of people that went to college, and so they did anything to get out of it, and they say that they're the most educated, but they was the most enrolled, and they took out a lot of student loan debts. So now that's the second wave of them tying themselves back to the Democratic Party, right? Because now they were voting for student loan forgiveness instead of voting on being able to do what they need to do and pull themselves out of the situation. They just wanted somebody to forgive their loans. And that's why you now see a bunch of people saying, oh man, they told us, it's always a they. They told us to go to school. They told us to do this. They told us to do that. You didn't say that you went into a STEM field. You didn't say you went into something that was meaningful and became an engineer, a doctor, or something like that. You just said that they told you to go to school, right? They told us to go to school, and now we stuck with these student loans. I can't believe it. And then basically Biden ran on a whole premise that he would forgive your student loans if, you voted for him, right? And so, again, it's just different waves of the same thing. When you talk about the civil rights movement, hijacked by the feminist movement, which was then hijacked by the LGBTQ community, which is now hijacked by this whole migrant wave, so much stuff, right? When you see this thing, basically what you're seeing is that you have to be self-motivated to not tie yourself to the federal government. And then in turn, you would then start to look at things from a more conservative perspective because you had to actually get it out the mud. But you got to be self-motivated to do it. The government shouldn't be the one to motivate you to do for yourself. But now that Trump is in office, he's requiring for you to meet an expectation to ultimately get yourself off of it if you are in a position to be able to work. If you're not disabled, if you're not elderly, if you're not a veteran or something like that, then you're gonna have to get off your ass. So now you're gonna have to figure it out for yourself. America is the land of the free. It is not the place where the government is supposed to teach you how to be able to be whatever it is that you're supposed to be. That's your parents' responsibility. That's your responsibility to your children. So while she does have a point, it does not mean that it makes sense. It does not mean that it's right. It does not mean that that's the thing that we should lean on. And we have to be more mindful. We have to be more conservative. We have to have common sense, and we have to be self-motivated to not have our federal government as our daddy. Let me know what y'all think inside of the comments. Make sure y'all tap into the Patreon. Link is in the description. Teach Henley, 40% off your first order, 20% off for life. I love y'all. Appreciate you. I'll holler at you guys later. Peace.